I wish to thank you, Jenny, but all the people here, and especially the Italian ambassador to Australia, is essentially Gian Ludovico De Martino di Montegiordano, who decided and promoted the symposium, and Professor Jenny Anderson, who also hosts all of us in her prestigious university. It's a special collaboration between our two nations. But now we enter in the argument. This is an important year for the history of the Italian Renaissance court and for the figure of the prince so well defined 500 years ago by Niccolò Machiavelli, to whom this symposium is dedicated. Our International Congress is also an exploration of the fundamental changes in patronage in northern and central Italy that occurred at Italian courts in the 15th and 16th centuries. The geography of the Italian courts, is heterogeneous and based on delicate balances, but it nevertheless presents some common features which will shape habits, customs, thought, arts, and culture right up to contemporary times. During the second half of the 15th century, most cities were governed by aristocratic families such as the Este in Ferrara, the Medici in Florence, and the Sforza in Milan, while others, such as Genoa and Venice, had republican systems of government. There was Papal Rome, always an exception, with its financial wealth and political relationships at an international level. To the south, with the unification of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, power was in the hands of the Spanish Aragonese. After the Peace of Lodi in 1454, and thanks to the diplomatic activities of Lorenzo de' Medici, Italy enjoyed a period of truce and balance, albeit fragile, among the courts. These situations permitted the consolidation of power of some lords, both through the development of the production of luxury artifacts and through money lending. In some cases, this opened the way to ambitious alliances with the most important European states, tightened through marriages with European royal families, as the Habsburg, the Valois, or the Aragonese. A central character of Machiavelli the Prince, and an example of his policy, is Valentino Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, who married a cousin of the King of France in 1499 and thus acquired the title of Duke of Valentinois. Before him, another example is given by Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro, who allied Milan with Spain through the marriage of his nephew Gian Galeazzo Maria Sforza to Isabella of Aragon. He also strenuously tried to arrange the marriage of his niece Bianca Maria Sforza to the Habsburg Emperor Maximilian I, nearly bankrupting the Duchy of Milan due to the barnsome dowry requested, more than 150,000 ducats, which compelled him to use the dowry of his wife, Beatrice d'Este, as well. Here the emperor, and here is the official portrait of Bianca Maria Sforza, probably made by Giovanni Ambrogio de Predis, assistant in Leonardo's workshop at a time between 1492 and 1493 on the occasion of her marriage by proxy to Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor. It is evident that this portrait was used as an instrument of political propaganda and a representation of the economic power of the Duchy of Milan. The young sacrificial victim of her unbounded political ambitions, who was to die unhappily at the age of 38, suggests in every detail of her clothing emblems, heraldic elements, and symbols a refined code of eloquent, not to say grandiloquent, messages. Her head jewel, hanging from the cap by a lenza, a thin textile strip, depicts the heraldic emblem of the brush, dear to Ludovico il Moro, who had reorganized, metaphorically swept out the Duchy of Milan, made of a ruby, turquoise, and 9 diamonds. The emerald at the top, cut in a heart shape, seals the marriage due to the shape and to the symbolic reference on a stone of the bride chastity. Also, the number of pearls, 5, refers to marriage, according to contemporary treatises, which harked back to ancient and medieval sources. The girl's dress, cut in Milanese style, used in a fabric in which there is a sempervivum, a perennial plant that grows in harsh and barren places, clearly visible both in the sleeves, and you see this, and in the bust area. It was one of the more used motifs on clothing in Ludovico il Moro's court. Another status symbol in the portrait is the belt, made in modules of round pearls and square gems, which constantly returns in the bridal trousseaux of the 15th and 16th century. A belt of the same shape is worn by the female figures depicted in the Libro del Sarto, tailor's book, a collection of drawings and models of dresses, curtains, flags, but also bed hangings, historical figures, and other design realized by the Milanese Gian Giacomo del Conte tailor's shop between 1550 and 1570. The portrait therefore exalts the Sforza lineage with the device of the sempervivum, the figure of Ludovico il Moro with the device of the brush, the one Ludovico il Moro used to sweep Italy clean, and also the chaste Milanese fiancé, wearing the most refined examples of ducal production in the field of goldsmithery and silk and gold thread weaving. She also shows the typical Milanese hairstyle, a long plait called coazzone, braided with ribbons, pearls, and precious stones. This fashion was used in the court by Beatrice, as can be seen in the Palace Forzesca, commissioned in 1494 by Ludovico il Moro for the Milanese church in Sant'Ambrogio ad Nemus, depicting the ducal family kneeling at the feet of the Madonna and Child, enthroned with the doctors of the Latin Church. Ludovico's interest in textiles and jewels is demonstrated in numerous circumstances. An abundance of precious objects was stored in his dressing rooms, camerini, and constituted his visiting card. Giorgio Contarini and Pisani, Venetian ambassador visiting Milan in 1492, described great quantities of gold and jewels, pearls of enormous size, numerous large diamonds, 60 very large silver vases worked in enamel, silver sculpture of saints, vases in gemstones. Crimson velvet and textiles with gold thread characterize his clothes and those of his retinue, and form a part of the precious gifts received and given by the Lord of Milan upon his marriage to Beatrice, as recounted by Isabella d'Este, sister-in-law of Ludovico il Moro, to her husband Francesco Sforza, Gonzaga. Also prominent are the precious fabrics. And you see here the best vases, all what Ludovico il Moro had, and the precious textiles you could see. Also prominent are the precious fabrics showing the emblems of the Sforzas that Ludovico donated to Basilica of Santa Maria delle Grazie in 1497 after his wife's death. Although Ludovico is best known as the patron of Leonardo's Last Supper, his magnificence was represented through the luxurious products commissioned and made of his own workshop and exported to other European countries, investing a great amount of money. These objects are gold, silver, and crimson textiles, inlaid precious stones, arms and armor, made with valuable metals. All this work, made with great skill, demonstrated the magnificence of the Duke, as well as the skill of the artists working in the land he ruled. And if Leonardo is the author of great engineering projects regarding the Milanese canals, we also owe to him the scenic design for the most important and memorable celebrations, such as the one of Paradise for the marriage of Isabella of Aragon to Gian Galeazzo Sforza in 1489. He also invented a machine to make maggiette, small discs in gilded bronze which decorated antepedian and fabrics and introduced new decorative motifs, such as the moresca moorish, a sort of meander adopted in goldsmithery, in fabrics, frescoes, and in miniature. And you can see here two drawings about 1485 and 1490. And this decoration is very similar to the back of an enamel pendant. And you can see the front in lapis lazuli, in cameo in lapis lazuli. We find a similar situation in the representation of power in the same magniloquent forms in the Ferrara of Borso d'Este. Indeed, if the predecessor, Leonello, Marquis of Ferrara, from 1441 to 1450, dedicates particular attention to the philosophical allegorical program dictated for the most part by the humanists of the court, among whom there was Guarino da Verona, who were summoned and were in very close contact with the Marquise, with Borso in particular, and then with Hercules I and Alfonso. The execution of important works of art is entrusted to leading artists such as Angelo Macagnino, Cosmettura, Michele Pannonio, who create not only the studiolo of the Muses, but share the executive phase of with very able local artisans, or ones called from the other courts to train the existing worker in new techniques. No record of Borso omits to underline his magnificentia, constituted of many aspects, among which the great expense of magnificent and splendid pomp in clothes and garb with gold and silver draping, embroidery, for him and for his most noble court, as Sabadino degli Arienti wrote in the Triumphis Religionis. It should be emphasized that in the 15th century, the Catholic world also changes its attitude towards wealth, no longer exorcised, but legitimized as a grace of God, a means to draw closer to virtue and so to salvation. Clothing fashion is censored only when it does not respect the sumptuary laws, and therefore the harmonious city context. On the other side, everyone is aware that activities connected to production ascribable to the management and adornment of the house in the Stense Duchy, for example, still at the end of the 16th century, occupied 85% of a courtier. Borso is almost considered Deus by his people and by the splendid and magnificent group which always accompanies him on his every outing. In his reign, the solemn welcome bestowed upon Emperor Federico III on his passing through Ferrara in 1452 becomes a display of precious banners in symbolic colors. The procession emerging from the castle has Borso on its head, completely dressed in gold cloth, with a necklace and precious stones on the cap, followed by Pietro Marochello, dressed in red to represent justice, while all the men in his retinue carry a white standard, a sign of joy. This exhibition of opulence, moreover, permitted him to obtain the investiture of the much sought-after title of Duke from the emperor, whom Borso loaded gifts. And you see here the Borso Bible, a fantastic symbol, and here you see the detail with Giovanni Bianchini, the emperor, and Borso d'Este. Also Lorenzo the Magnificent, a humanist lord in his elite circle of Platonic philosophers, does not disdain objects of luxury, as is demonstrated by the rich garments in white velvet, many of which are adorned with pearls and gold, and many sleeves encrusted with pearls and precious stones, as well as rings with stones such as rubies and diamonds on the occasion of his marriage to Clarice Orsini in 1469, as narrated by Giovanni Rucellai in the Zibaldone. The Florentine workshops are equipped to respond to all types of requests from their clients. One example is that of Antonio Polaiolo, who, in the second half of the 1400s, made the design for the embroidery wall panel with stories of the Baptist for the feast of St. John, the silver cross for the baptistery of St. John, a shield in plaster, now in the Louvre, and a crucifix in cork in the church of San Lorenzo in Florence, while the workshop of Antonio's brother, Piero, produced numerous female portraits, some probably drawn by Antonio, 4 of which, now in Poldi Pezzoli, in Berlin, in Florence, and in New York, yes, in Berlin, as you've seen, demonstrate the painter's knowledge and mastery of all the most refined textile and goldsmith techniques. The artist traveled between the courts, often requested as a diplomatic exchange between lords, or following ties of marriage as a sign of interest of a court for some types of luxury objects. A very significant example of the production is the production of tapestry. Here is the tapestry with cherubs chosen as the icon of this symposium. It forms a part of a series of 5 hangings. The other 4 are in the Museo Calouste Gulbenkian in Lisbon, drawn by Giulio Romano and woven by Nicola and Giovanni Carker, tapestry makers from Brussels, whose family had migrated to Italy at least 1 generation before. The tapestry could have been made in Mantova, the seat of the Cardinale for whose walls they were destined, or most probably in Ferrara, where the 2 brothers are an important center of tapestry production. The series, called in inventory the little cherubs, Li Puttini, was in fact made for Cardinal Ercole Gonzaga, ruling the state of Mantova in 1540, as is demonstrated by the presence in the center, as you've seen, of the tapestry of the prelate's coat of arms, 2 swans fighting an eagle, and the motto, sic repugnant. The happy animated scene evokes a pagan representation of Cupids busy playing, dancing, and picking fruit, but it also celebrates the good government of the Gonzagas, and thus the return of the Duchy of Mantova to a happy era like that of the childhood, an age of prosperity and harmony which Cardinal Ercole had introduced. In addition to wool and silk, the preciousness of the artifact and its animation under light is given by the very dense presence of gold and silver metallic thread, which creates surprising glints and iridescence. It's a sort of jewel fabric, woven on a cartoon by the painter Giulio Romano, a pupil of Raphael, to whom we owe, among others, the fresco of Palazzo Te, executed between 1524 and 1534 on commission of Duke Federico II Gonzaga. He also was a great inventor of table decoration and furnishing. He must be considered the peculiar advisor and designer of the complex figurative rituals of the court. He is the creator of numerous projects for silverware, table decoration, silver decoration, table decoration, flags, cradles, casket, and candelabra, depicted also in this fresco in Palazzo Te. Here you can see some details for the banqueting scene in the Psyche's room. Among his inventions are the wash basin with a whirlpool, now at Chetford, which the artist speaks in a letter to Ferrante Gonzaga in 1542, with a grotesque mask at a center which swallows all the creature contained in the water. And from the top, the candle holder, the vase with a lid, and the gold belt. In the drawing of the belt, there are 2 lions facing each other, the heraldic symbol of the family of Vincenzo Guerrieri, the commissioner or recipient of the object. The lid of the vase is a grotesque mask and a dragon's head on the left seems to want to take a wooden handle. It is perhaps a bed warmer, of which the artist speaks in a letter as an artifact designed for Cardinale Ercole. When possible, Giulio Romano, as emerges from his letters, expects to follow the various executive phases of the work, often having a model made in wood or another material to check the functionality of the final result. His designs are often too daring or original to be carried through, but they have been a source for other artists, especially later on. We have now reached the first decades of the 16th century, and the political and economic history of Italy and Europe have changed. From the beginning of the 1500s, the Duchy of Milan falls into the hands of the French and then of the Spanish. In Florence, the Medici are ousted in 1494 and again in 1527. In the same year, there is the sack of Rome, after which the Pope must bow to Charles V. And finally, Naples is absorbed into the Spanish Empire. These are clear manifestations of a strong political crisis, aggravated by pressure from the Muslim Orient, which will have to be faced above all by Venice. The shift of the trading axis from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, the resulting alteration of the international market, the wars of religion and of dominion of the great states, for whom Italy had become a land of conquest and famines, are other factors which profoundly change the political and economic scenario in which the center of production of the Italian and European courts find themselves working during the 16th century. An irreversible internationalization process of models, repertoire, material, techniques seems to be starting. Our artisan still remains a protagonist, called to all the courts and asked for ever broader repertoires, which must always and in any case be based on ancient sources. In fact, the constitution process of modern classicist culture, in its most consistent arrangement, is accomplished substantially in the first 30 years in this period, more than in the past, is mainly of the 16th century in Italy. Talking about clothing and decoration objects, in this period, more than in the past, is mainly a matter of communication. Fashion becomes more and more an important part of a cultural and communication system. Apart from, in the book The Prince by Niccolò Machiavelli, celebrated here, the importance of the dress code was underlined years later also by Baldassare Castiglione in the book of The Courtier, Libro del Cortegiano, published in 1528. The fundamental problem of classical and classicist ethics, which is posed by Machiavelli, Guicciardini and Castiglione, is that of knowing in what way the courtier, like and any other man, should behave in the different and changing matter of the world. Clothing has a prominent place in this debate, as it represents the identity of each person in occasional relations with others. Italy is the privileged scene of the confrontation between European powers. It is also the photographs of the political and military situation, the side effects of a compulsory internationalization produced by decades of wars fought on Italian territories, as well as by ancient trading relations with the East. On one end, a forerunner of the new theme appears to be Isabella d'Este, the first female patron of the art and collector of the Renaissance, who calls to her court such artists as Leonardo, Perugino, and Tiziano, who made unforgettable portraits of her, but above all, a personality capable of creating in the cave and the study a treasure trove with a high cultural content, which was also the self-representation of power, where there were kept ancient coins, gems, vases in gemstones, ancient statues in bronze and marbles. As testifies the inventory of her collection, edited between 1540 and 1542, listing the artistic and natural rarities collected, she owned 1,235 medals and sculpture, among which was Praxiteles' Sleeping Cupid, many of which were recovered during the sack of Rome. Attentive to clothing fashion, she calls to court numerous goldsmiths, one of whom is Rocco da Ferrara, to make sculpture with a religious theme, but also personal jewels using, in addition to precious stones such as rubies and diamonds, also ancient cameos, which she had mounted as pendant or brooches, or modern ones on rings. Isabella is remembered and decided to be portrayed with a particular hairstyle, different from the ruling fashion in the plait. She introduced the so-called capigliara, a cup of spoon gold with pearls and precious stones, or, as emerges from the inventory of jewels passed down to her adored daughter-in-law, Margherita Paleologo, a netting gold leaf with 80 rubies. Her most famous portrait, like that of Tiziano, or the copy with variation on the letter made by Rubens, show her with this particular type of hairstyle, which will later become widely used, adopted first by her daughter-in-law Margherita, and that in various courts, as evinced by the portrait of Eleonora da Toledo de' Medici. In fact, the Medici court, and as a result, the Florentine textile and goldsmith production, destined for local use, starting from 1539, the year of the marriage of Cosimo I to Eleonora, daughter of the Viceroy of Naples, Don Pedro Alvarez de Toledo, underwent a significant transformation, opening to international canons. It is a political declaration which manifests itself even through the clothing fashion of the princess. After the Savonarola rigor, which lasts until the 1530s, as demonstrated by Lucrezia Panciatichi's dress without decoration, single ring, and very simple cap gathering up her hair in the Bronzino portrait, Eleonora portraits by Bronzino, respectively painted in 1543 and 1545, we witness the introduction of a new language. In the first portrait, she wears a gold net coordinated with a cap, decorated with pearls, which is a novelty in Florence. Besides, the sleeve, again detached from the gold embroideries, the bustier, are attached to the puffed shoulder, called baragoni, with precious pearls. Also, in the official portrait with her son Giovanni, and in this case, perhaps even more, there is the wish, as in the case of Beatrice Sforza more than 40 years earlier, to represent, through the portrait, the display of wealth and skill, as well as the decorative taste of the Florentine workmanship of that period, underlined by the severe rigor of the cut of the dress, the sober jewel with pearls and the superb belt, which had to emphasize the feminine evidence of clothing fashion, in a sort of rigid armor. Among the rare examples in existence, there is a dress in which Eleonora was buried, which was painstakingly restored in 2000, and one very similar from a sartorial point of view from about 50-60, which is in the Museo Nazionale in Palazzo Reale of Pisa. Benvenuto Cellini has worked for Eleonora and realized, among the numerous jewels listed in documents, a belt, a pleasant invention of small masks and other things, which has been recognized in a portrait by Bronzino of about 1550, of which you can see also a detail. The portrait of the second wife of Cosimo, Camilla Martelli, shows elements loosely inspired by Oriental fashions. There is an overabundance of decoration which testifies to the masterful technical expertise both in textile production, of silk in particular, and in goldsmithery of the Medici, the center of production. We will find recognition and organization thanks to Ferdinando I with the opening of the Opificio delle Pietre Dure a short time afterward in 1588. Even funeral adornments are given considerable attention and investment. For the funeral of the Holy Roman Empress and Queen of Spain, Isabella, in 1539, the Camera Ducale paid the incredible sum of more than 18,000 liras to the merchant Giovanni Antonio Terzago, only to decorate the house of Governor Alfonso D'Avalos in mourning drapes. So, what were the so-called major arts in Renaissance? Thank you.